Vinod, welcome to the Medium podcast.
Thank you so much. Very good to be here, Jeff.
It's good to see you again. I know it's been some time from our previous lives in the SaaS world. How's this week been treating you?
It could not have gotten better. I think between a sick child, a child who's going to go to school, and also sort of building my own startup, I have got all things reality, and the week has begun on that note. But I recently quit a 9-to-5 role. To go on to build something. So my weekdays and my weekends usually are blurring because I try to live the weekend during the weekday and then the weekday during the weekend as well. So the week's been great so far.
And what is that number one task that you have allocated yourself this week that you must complete for your startup?
Right. There's a lot at stake. I think one is all of this is very new to me, building a startup and at the same time, the vision of what we are building within the startup. So that's I would say a killer combination for somebody like me who wants to learn. But at the same time, a lot of what I'm doing at the moment is also really discovering how do we do this the right way. So one of the discoveries we are thinking about this week is what should our brand identity look like? What should the persona of the brand look like? Because this isn't like any other brand exercise people are building. This is not a SaaS product. So in a way, we had to talk to many people, understand what is being done today versus what needs to be done tomorrow. So this entire week has gone on a lot of research, a lot of interviews with people who have done this, and trying to put all of that together to see if we can come up with our own identity of the brand as well. So that's probably the top of my mind this week.
Interesting. And when you do answer this, I'm very curious. Feel free to intertwine what this startup is all about. What have you decided upon so far based upon the feedback? Is there anything that's sort of concrete that you're thinking, you know what, I've hit the nail on the head? Or are you thinking to yourself, I need a bit more time?
I think there's always a thought process on both hitting the nail and then quickly realizing that we need to think more. I don't think it's yep, we've got a wonderful idea. I think it's always been the case ever since I've closely watched people build anything interesting. They are never really, there's no start and there is no end. It's always some ideas from your childhood coming alive and then evolving as we speak. So a lot of what we've been thinking about, and I'll give a quick overview on what we are doing. Although this is more a podcast, I don't want it to make it sound like a pitch. So I'm going to try to.
You can do whatever you want. You want to go pitch? You want to sell me something?
I have like a PPT here, right here.
Oh no, I don't want to see a PPT.
No. I think one of the things we wanted to build is to stay away from it being sounding like a startup, because this is unlike anything else, at least personally, I feel like we should be doing at the moment. A quick, story behind why we are building this is I grew up in a tier 2 city in India, and India is, as you have seen, Chennai and all the other places in India, tier 2 cities usually are underdeveloped from a world perspective, but overdeveloped from a nature perspective. So growing up, I have always been closer to nature. I've always felt the need of being outside and getting cut by thorns and staying away from a pathway because they are rumored to be snakes and all of that. And as I moved out of college and joined cosmopolitan cities, nature became once a while in the balcony, terrace garden, or maybe a plant which is written to die, because I've never seen house plants live for a long time inside. It's not supposed to be. There is no house plant. You can't tie a
It's
plant
it's
in,
it's
right? So
unnatural.
it's unnatural, but we have lots of it in our house. But we have our own ways of dealing with nature. But while I moved a lot away from it, my kids in the newer generation have completely moved out of it. They're afraid, they don't understand. And it's being taught also in schools and colleges in many different ways, which make it sound like it's one ecocentric system. It's very human centered, or it's very big species centered. You will know a lot more about a tiger reserve than you would know about the ants or anything else. So in my pursuit of trying to do something which is both giving back to the community, but at the same time, something different, because in the last 19 years of my IT/SaaS industry, I think I've seen a lot of people come up with good problem statements and solve for it. I've had exceptional visionaries who I've had the privilege of working with, but not a lot of people take interest in solving for something like this. It's a very small community I've seen, and it's also inaccessible. I feel like understanding conservation, understanding biodiversity is very scientific rather than very practical, very real. So all of this put together, I found a bunch of passionate people who were also asking the same questions on how do we make biodiversity conservation, making people fall in love with nature a norm rather than it just being on Instagram or on a vacation. What else could you do to sort of drive it? So in a sense, all of this put together, we formed Mycelium Ecology, where our goal is to build online and offline platforms for anybody to get inspired by nature and all aspects of nature, including the impact humans make, including the impacts tiny ants through any other large animal and species, flora and fauna could make. So I'm now brushing up on my biology 101, understanding what a leaf is and all of that, but it's quite interesting. And I think we are building for the future. I've clearly steered away from SaaS. So going back to your question on what is the brand we want to build. So as you can see, it has a lot of evolution to it. And our belief is that this is not a product company where a product manager has built it. In a sense, somebody has already built it. We are only managing it. So a lot of our brand will revolve around observation and the beauty of observation, because that's all we can do. We are not here to say that this tree has to be here, although a lot of people do it. Forest takes care of itself. I don't think we really need to do anything.
We just get in the way.
We just get in the way, perfectly put. So yeah, a lot of the brand and the tonality there is about simplification, observation, very hands-on visual representation of what we could be thinking about. So as you can, we've been brainstorming ideas on fluidity, the fluidicity of the whole thing. What sort of logos do we get? Mycelium itself, mushrooms itself has a story to say. You could tap into it. So quite interesting conversations. I'm getting a first-hand view into the creative side of it. I've never really done this before.
How do you feel? Feels good.
Feels like I'm in school. I'm sort of like a sponge. Similar to what you're doing in your podcasts, I'm sort of observing all the stories and then writing, going back to Wikipedia and sort of what was this and all. But quite interesting, and I think I never really saw myself doing it. Now that I'm doing it, it's fascinating. I think there's a lot to learn and learn it the right way. This is not the biological name of a plant. Which is what I feared when I was growing up, is I wouldn't understand a complex terminology of something. Versus a lot of what I'm learning now is simplification of why photosynthesis happens. It's so beautiful when you think about it the right way. And I wish I could go back to school to do it all over again. Maybe
hey, you have gone back to school.
There you go. Yes, yes,
yes.
yes.
I can take this in many angles, right? My mind is sort of running here, right? You mentioned not a lot of people who would want to take on this challenge, so to speak. And you've come from an IT SaaS background. You know, there are many problem statements that
Yeah.
a lot of visionary people and very intelligent people have solved in a very um, simple and effective way. Why do you think something like ecology and conservation, which is who we are as people and as a civilization, has less of a demand, so to speak? Why do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I think that's the journey I'm sort of on. I don't
Mm,
think I'm an expert with a perception on why it is, but here's what I've learned so far. I think there are many people who are doing it, and at the core of it, it's how the value is perceived and the noise that value makes is what I've realized so far. Let me give you an example. A startup's value is through the profit it makes or the customers it has. And a simple Google will tell us 100,000 formulas to interpret a KPI a startup is bringing. And there are many theories behind valuation and stuff. When you think about this, this is from a time scale, this is fairly new and it's evolved, but it's almost very repeatable. You and I have seen our own company sort of go through the evolution of KPI, but then it was not frankly new every year. It didn't change. It probably changed quarter on quarter, but then at the end of the day, it was still the same MRR, ARR, number of customers, and the
very, very
expansion.
fundamental.
Very fundamental, correct. Yeah. But I've realized that nature as a whole is so vague that many people have tried building narratives in many different ways. So if you go to a climate tech startup, their version of value is perceived very differently than an agriculture startup or a UNESCO or a government agency. And also the local tribals themselves have had perceived the value of the land for a time immemorial. So I think one aspect of it is, not to sound too controversial, capitalism hasn't entered nature yet. People are greedy to cut down trees to build land. But once they understand the true value of what the ecosystem could provide, and we are beginning to see in the last 10 years, the whole carbon and the narrative about carbon's taking a different tangent, and a
Good
lot of
point.
people are
Good
doing
point.
good, interesting points. So in a way, I think it's so diversified and in silos that every time I meet with somebody who's doing it, they've done exceptional work. But they're not beating their chest out in saying it. And even if they are saying it in such a complex white paperish way that it loses interest towards the audience. Right.
Interesting.
And our, at least my thought process here and the vision for Mycelium is what could we do to simplify this? Not that solve it, but simplify it. Solution is a community-driven problem, but solution to this could be accessibility. India is a great example. I've been to Australia, and it's so out in the open, and a lot of people like to spend a lot of time in the outback. And there are people, my personal favorite is Steve Irvine, and I've seen him growing up. I've seen the enthusiasm he's got. And in India, there are many people who are doing this in silos. I've met with some exceptional minds who can tell stories and wove it through nature and make it sound like you're insignificant in front of it. And it's so beautiful. But they understand the true value that they don't advertise it. There is no need to go out there to make money, because that's when you send it to mass. So what we are trying to do at Mycelium is also walk the fine line of not making it sound too obnoxious, or in a loss of a better word, capitalist, but at the same time make it a lot more accessible. So we want to talk to kids, we want to help them understand why amphibians are in a certain way. We want ecology clubs to come in to be able to access a piece of land where they can study, and in a sense build a community and see if we can be part of this close net, rather than make this close net and worldwide thing. Our goal is not to make it worldwide, but sort of to expand into this close knit community and get as many people inculcated into this as possible. So I believe that's why not a lot of people know it. Not that they are averse to it, but when they thought the right way, when they observe it the right way, they automatically get initiated into it. It's not rocket science. It's Mother Nature. You go outside, you fall in love with it.
Interesting. So you're walking the fine line between, it's a bit of an oxymoron in a way. You want to bring in the principles of establishing a startup in this particular space, yet you don't want to let it be consumed by the money motive, which could really change the agenda of what you're trying to achieve. So what would be that problem statement, and how would you set KPIs that would sort of, give you a tap on the shoulder and go, hey, Vinod, I'm on the right track?
Yeah. KPIs. I've been trying to think about KPIs in this space.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because because you and I, we know SaaS, right? You can go CAC, you can go
exactly.
LTV,
Yeah.
You can do deal cycle close, you can do anything, right?
Correct.
How would you do it here?
Yeah, and there is a today's world, which is a very trying to fit the aspect of KPI. Carbon sequencing is one thing, and a lot of people are obviously thinking about the biomass a particular land can drive, the agriculture output a particular land can provide, and there are 100 ways you could think about pushing a KPI in. But for us, what we want to be able to do is sort of take a step back and think about what is it that our own world is saying. And by our own world, I'm not a saint to say that we want to conserve Earth, we want to solve world hunger problem, but we want to be able to take on the execution aspect of it. We don't want it to be just in theory. So we are identifying depleted biodiverse landscape. We are buying them, and then we are building a lot of this. So in a sense, each of the ecosystem we are investing in yields different set of metrics. It can't be unique. If we take,
it's really tangible what you're doing.
Exactly, and it is also. It's also developing our perception of KPI, because whether we call it KPIs or not, they'll continue to build, they'll continue to grow. We are calling it KPI to interfere, to interpret, and then to see if there is succession in what we are doing. So in a way, what I was trying to say was, we want to be able to first build out a space for observational capability. So we think of milestones rather than KPIs. We want to be able to build, one of our milestones is we've got a bunch of these properties in Western Ghats in India. This is a biodiverse landmass. And for us, we want to be able to build a capacity for observation, for anybody to come in and say, I could do X, Y, and Z. This is a problem I want to be able to solve for. Because as as a, as a minute land, you could say, I could develop this, I could convert this carbon. I have X amount of carbon coming out of here. I have so much agriculture. But we don't want to be talking in a time scale of 3 years. We want to be talking a time scale of what happens in 50 years. Does this particular tree grow, outgrow, build another ecosystem? So many research has already been done. So we want to give the platform. So one of the things we are thinking about, the milestone-based KPIs, in saying we'll first build observatories, we'll build experiences, we'll build treks for anybody to come in and experience this, learn from it.
Interesting.
And our formula is called observe, interpret, and then evolve. So we first take time to observe, collectively observe it, then collectively interpret what it is, and then evolve, which is the point where metrics could come in. Evolution could be circular economy, using the local tribals to help build some stuff, working with nonprofit organizations to do some deforestation. A lot of that is already happening. So we are not claiming that we want to reinvent the wheel, but we want to take time in observing. And I think that is the biggest metric we want to drive, is milestone-based KPIs, for us to first sit and observe and understand what this is offering, because it's already built. We are just getting into a roadmap which is
and like you're managing, you want to manage that sort of experience, so to speak. So if someone around the world wants to see how conservation and biodiversity and the influence of us can work together, they can go to Mycelium Ecology to experience and to interpret that sort of way, isn't it?
Absolutely. And get inspired. And get inspired. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And you mentioned, obviously, I think obviously that we know that obviously nature in general can be sort of overlooked, as you can tell. It's not just seeing a tree or the river on Instagram, right? Why do you think we've placed less of an importance on nature? Like, I know you and we've talked about it briefly.
Yeah.
I've given you, I probably seeded the question in you.
Yeah.
Why do you think we're sort of not really cherishing nature, you could argue?
Yeah. I think we cherish it. But I go and take a look at hashtags on Instagram on nature, and people do some wonderful things. There are many people in India who do things also in a beautiful way, bringing out the diversity and stuff. It needs to be a lot more accessible for it to be understood. And the medium, I think human beings have also evolved in so many different ways that the medium of observation and inspiration cannot be taught in a simple white paper, like science journals. I was reading a beautiful scientific paper the other day on mushrooms and the fear of mushrooms. And this
mushrooms, okay,
it's a real thing. It's called mycophobia, and mycophilia, which was also termed around the same time for people who love mushrooms. And obviously, mycelium is based off of this beautiful organism. And the reason why I say this is there is this paper which talks about the reason behind people fearing mushroom is actually very cultural, and it's Anglo-Saxon. The Britishers actually were really, most of the 16th, 17th century explosion of biology was driven by scientists from Britain and UK, obviously. And they and the certain group of people termed mushrooms to be just decomposers and toxic. But on the same time scale, you come to Southeast Asia, you come to India, you come to places like Russia, people have been foraging mushrooms and including it in their meal, including it in their religion for time immemorial. So in a way, I think not understanding mushrooms had triggered phobia for so many people. Mycophobia as a term came in the 16th century. So I'm not, I was actually really averse to mushrooms because in school, I was taught that they grow near wastewater and they are decomposers. But now research is pointing out that forests, 95% of the forest covers are filled with mycelium and they share the nutrients. And there are some brilliant books which have come out which talk about the importance of it. So in a way, what we are doing is also pausing to observe things the right way. Because our interpretation makes or break, I think, the value of what that is perceived.
It's also
like
education.
It's also education. It's also pointing kids on the right direction and getting them to perceive it the right way. Right. And if I had somebody who told me, no, mushrooms are not just decomposing, that's great. But I had to also evolve. I grew up in a time where access to information like this was not available, or it was limited available, and it was taught to the right people who could afford to do it, not to in tier 2, tier 3. But majority of our forests today reside in tier 2, tier 3. They don't reside in cosmopolitan. But majority of the cosmopolitan people dictate what forests should look like. So in a way, there is that imbalance there. And I think that's why importance of nature is lost in this tussle between making cosmopolitan the new urban nature and sort of forgetting what the true nature is all about.
You know, it's funny. I saw an interesting post the other day about Brunei. I think it was Brunei. I can't remember where it was, or Southeast Asia, where 72% of the country is basically populated by natural forests. And I can't remember whether it was some government
Borneo, I think. Borneo, yeah, if I'm not wrong.
And some government body said, you know, this country only contributes to minimal percentage to world GDP. Shouldn't we cut down the trees in that country so that it can generate more GDP? And I'm like, well, isn't that just the wrong KPI to set? And that, you know, it's just let it be, as opposed to putting a profit motive and that GDP figure, which is sort of so renowned in terms of measuring success.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we put in our observational skills, we could derive success out of coexistence. One of the other ethos we have at Mycelium is that, which is we want to understand this to coexist rather than understand this to either make them the main picture. Sorry, I've got dogs. Part of the nature and urban ecosystem is these organisms. But no, but for me, what really stood out, and I think I read from your Twitter feed only, I read this World Bank had mentioned that Borneo or someplace had it. I don't know if you had liked it.
Yeah, we probably saw the same thing.
I think you liked it, and I saw it recently. It's quite interesting because that is the perception, like you said. GDP is considered to be the success towards it. Obviously, monetary value is required, needs to be taught.
It's easier to measure.
Without it, it's easier to measure, and it's the need of the hour. And it's very easy for you and I to sit here and talk about it when people are still dependent on money for putting the food on the table. And so, in a way, what does that coexistence look like, or what could that be? Is what we are imagining. And we are hoping we could build our own coexistence theory at Mycelium, because we want to be able to work with nature to evolve. And the human evolution involves monetary aspect. It's just not good oxygen and good water. Good money also needs to come. That's when people get more active. It's part of the cycle, and that's when accessibility becomes easier as well, right? It's a vicious circle, but you've got to tread the line the right way. Many people are doing it. There's a lot of inspiration. I've seen so many conservation projects in South America, in South Africa, who are coexisting the right way. Just need to build our own formula, inspire more people to coexist, and hopefully it becomes better and better.
I think it was the late founder of North Face, I believe, or correct me if I'm wrong, or Esprit. He purchased a substantial amount of land in near Patagonia, I believe. And he's passed away now, and he's utilizing the land for conservation. So I believe that's sort of a similar path about retaining nature so future generations can learn from it in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And learn from it is that I just said the right way to think about it.
You know, I'm liking this new chapter of where you're approaching with this, Vinod. And you mentioned 19 years of IT, SaaS. Um, we don't have to talk about it. You know, I could go back to the whole ecology and conservation, but I'm just sort of curious to see it in mind in terms of what was that catalyst to do something so different? Because let's round it up. 20 years is a long time.
It doesn't feel long, definitely. I think a lot of people I've spoken to have said, have you gone mad? You've got another 10
I didn't say
years.
that. I didn't say that.
No,
I'm
I
liking
know.
inspiration.
No, that's why you are the median podcast. You're in the middle, balanced between both sides of the spectrum.
Right. Just keep in mind, audience, I'm not paying this guy. He just quoted himself.
No. It's a great name. But no, I truly think that the 20 years have been a catalyst. And I'm not here claiming to have found the elixir of happy life and saying that everybody should do it. I think there has to be creators in the SaaS space, as much inspiration to come from there as I found inspiration in what I'm doing. And I'd love for everybody to come in and join. But I think at the end of the day, it's what the individual person is passionate about. And there are many people who are passionate about building what is considered to be boring software, but it's not if they love what they do. I don't think there was one particular incident which triggered it. And I think it's a culmination of me growing up myself, me growing up with outside my stronghold, or rather outside the stronghold of Indian middle class family, which is a very close knit sort of a thing. Me growing up with my family, with my wife, with my kids, and also, black swan events like pandemic. And also some aspect of the evolution of the career I've taken and where it had led me in the last 20 years. I think that it's taught me a lot. It also taught me to observe things differently. And one of the observations I did was, could I do something like this? And because I've always feared jumping out and doing things, I've never considered myself to be a builder. I've always considered myself to be a operator. I'm really good. I've always thought I was really good with somebody else's vision. But I found often people tell me, hey, why don't you do it? And not that I was not confident, but I was a lot more afraid, I think, intimidated by the fact that am I, this fear of faking. Do people think that all I'm doing is faking? And
imposter syndrome, as I
thank
say.
you very much. Yeah, imposter syndrome. Yeah, I've always had stuff like that running through my mind. But when I met with people in the last 4-5 years of this journey of doing something of my own, especially in this field of agriculture or in this field of nature, I think I've also come across people who have had similar. I've been lucky enough to have attracted people who've switched big industries. I've met with people who've shifted from IT to this. I've met with people who shifted from real estate to this. And in their stories, I've also seen that they struggle too. They've struggled jumping into this. They've had similar thoughts as well. So I think all of this had sort of led to Mycelium sort of being hopefully the first of the many leap of faiths I'm able to take. But I don't think it was one catalyst event. It's a combination of all of this. And I have to give credit to the 20 years of the work, because all my skills of time management, through thinking outside the box, through questioning it, all has come from inspirations I've drawn from people I've met in these 20 years. So I would never leave them outside, I think. And I think I've got a long way to go. There are many people who are still more smarter. As I run this, there are people behind me who are the younger generation who are running much more faster than we are in this evolution space. So yeah, lots to catch up on.
Oh, well, on the assumption you see it as a race, right? But to me, I see it as a very unique journey that you're going on, Vinod. I'm liking how you're learning again. Needless to say, I was very fascinated about this journey when you saw broadcasted it to your network, and I'm like, wow, that's actually very interesting.
Yeah.
And where does the part about leading a minimal lifestyle kick in?
I think as soon as I start to talk about it, I sound obnoxious. I think I've always found it in my mind, right? In my mind, speaking about stuff like this has been perceived so much to be out there in the open that often, like I've caught myself coming back on social media, but there are so many experiences just from my life alone which haven't made to social media, that are so personal to me. I find it a lot more cherishing. So in a way, the leading the minimal life has always been something which I'm discovering and evolving as I go. Like, for example, 5 years ago, I thought I led a minimal life. Compared to 5 years from now, I'm like, oh my God, there was a lot of gluttony there. And 5 years
Gluttony is
from
a nice
now,
word.
yeah. And 5 years from now, as I evolve, I guess, and as I meet with more inspiring people, and as I hear more stories, I think I'll take a leaf off of the chapter and I'll evolve. But in many different ways, simplicity has always been the way I have learned, and everything had to be toned down for me. I have always used this term, explain like I'm five. Anything I do, I've got to pause to read a couple of times and understand it. Even in schools and college, I could do basic foundation really well, but I could not add the drama and build on it because understanding took time for me. And I've always assumed that that's in that race of things that has always been at the back of my mind, keeping it simple. And a couple of things I've learned is it's great for me to be able to think about it, but as soon as I open my mouth and tell somebody else to think about it, and I don't even have to think about a stranger, but my own kids or my own family, it quickly backfires, because it's not that they don't want to be minimal, but their perception of minimal is very different from mine, similar to how I thought minimal was 5 years ago was very different. So in a way, what I'm doing at the moment is trying to make my life a lot more simpler and easier without a lot of fanfare.
What does that mean by it? What does that mean?
Everything from a financial perspective. A lot of the not that I'm against luxury, but I am actually observing, interpreting, and evolving every purchase I make. Even the car, not that I do a lot of research, but you sort of want to think about what purpose does it serve, and leave it at that. You're sitting inside the car and you're driving it. You don't really care what it looks from outside. I've always wanted fancier cars. But I've taken a toned down version of a nice SUV, a utility vehicle for my large family. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm preaching, but my perception have led me to simplify the food I eat, uh, the amount of food I take, the thing which I can eat, simplify or limit myself, and find the balance in the fun I have versus the work I do. As well, the work-life balance is a great aspect of simplification. I think work-life balance is nothing but simplifying your work. In a way, balance is simplification, because at that moment you're able to simplify and find a balance to it. And during my corporate life also, I've sort of found a way to simplify my weekend, right, and make it balanceful, make it spend more time with the kids, but at the same time take time to read, take time to spend time with friends, take time to take care of my mental wellness, take time to do all of it. So evolving and finding this balance to me is being minimal, and not overboarding everything, right? Have a good Friday night, but also ensure that you have some housework versus your own work, and simplify it, I guess, and putting it in words. And I don't know, I'm finding it a little difficult, but
No,
I
no,
hope you
no.
know what you mean. Yeah.
No. It's fascinating, right? Because as you pointed out, there's a lot of things going in our head, right? So I said to myself, why don't I just sort of create a stage for people to sort of share it? Because I'm listening, I'm understanding, and I'm going, wow, that's interesting, right? But then my question goes to me, it's great to know you on a much more personal level, Vinod. And then I'm asking myself, why do you want to go down that minimal route? Is it because you want to have less headache? Like I realized we were speaking with so many different people from different walks of life. There's always that North Star we have in the back of our head that really guides us in how we act, right? And for you, right? What is that? Like, why go down a minimal route? Why go in your questionnaire and go to Jeff? Can I live that minimal life that I'm dreaming about?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. The word you used is the right way to do it. Dreaming about, and
Yeah. Why is it a dream? But
it's a dream for everybody. I don't think I've ever come across somebody who said, "I want complexity in my life." I love complexity.
True. Good point. Very good point.
And whether they derive or whether they work towards simplifying their complexity is the journey I think a lot of people are taking. But complexity is there. Simplification does not make life a lot more easier to live. I think hardship will continue to be there.
Inevitable.
Inevitable, and it's just part of who we are and what we do. I don't think we need another lifetime to be able to identify and understand why we feel like hardship is there. So in a way, a lot of what I want to achieve as part of this minimalistic life is what I've always felt to be the world I want to make for myself. And this has evolved. I've gone from
I've got the answer
fan
now.
yeah fancy. I want to be fancy. That's the world I made at that point, and everything revolved around that. Then I wanted to have I ran behind paychecks, and more world it revolved around that. As I grew up the career ladder, my materialistic value also grew, but that simplicity back in the day. I'm fine with the money I'm earning. I'm fine with what I'm doing. So in a way, I think for me, the meaning to be simple is the world I want to create. But it could still be a lot more complex for somebody else to view my world and say, this is a complex world, my friend. Like maybe a mountain yogi out in Himalayas could even say, leave all of it and come and join me up in the mountains, right? That's the bare simplicity you can think about. I still drive a fancy car. I still have a, debt. I still spend money. Is that simple? It's a relative thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's each their own. It's a very subjective question, isn't it?
It is. So for me, I think what I'm trying to do is build my world, shape it with people around me, and include their world into my world. Dreams of my wife, dreams of my kids, and what I'd like from them, what they'd like from this family, and all of it, and sort of let it guide through this simplicity, I guess. But defining what it means exactly is, I think, where often people lose out on, is because you can't define this. This is very relative. It's a very personal experience.
It is.
I think you'll have to evolve yourself through it, I guess.
For me, you can probably see my hat, Vinod.
Yeah, I saw a lot of leaves there and guitar.
Can you see the words?
Uh, the word simple, lives simple. Yeah, there you go. Wow. Yeah.
There you go, right? So for me, the reason why I'm so fascinated about your minimal life is that I made a very conscious decision to have peace from mind.
Mm, mm.
Now, for me, peace from the mind is that I wanted to stop chasing in my head. You know, it's constant, right? The constant,
Very constant.
the hum of life. We're to keep chasing, we're to do this, we're to do that. And I said to myself, I want this to stop.
Yeah.
Because it's annoying.
Yeah.
It's brought a
Yeah.
lot of heartache, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, my definition of living simply is to have peace from mind. Because so therefore I'm very curious to see a different person's take from how to do that. And like what you said, right? It's very much a subjective, a very much a personal journey about what that is. And no one from the outside can really know what you really mean. And I suppose for me, I'm just trying to get it out of you, Vinod. But when you do, right, if you can tell me what that is in a few words or a sentence, I think that's podcast episode number 2345.
There you go. There you go. No, I think trying to put it in words is it's not, again, you've got to try to keep it simple, right? It's not complex. It's not that complex. That
how about 3 words? I'll give you 3 words. You got to just summarize it for me in 3 words. Now you don't have to tell me now.
Yeah, I'll think about it.
Think about
I'll
it,
definitely
right?
think about it.
I will knock on your door. I will come to Bangalore, right? Knock on your door. Knock on your door.
We should do the trek together and do it. Yeah.
Hey, and tell me about the Western Ghats. You know, I know you told me a very interesting story how some time ago, correct if I'm wrong, Vinod, Africa was connected, I believe, the northeast coast of Africa was connected to the southwestern tip of India. Is that correct?
That's right. Not just India, but the whole Africa planet, Gondwana. And again, I'm not an expert, so I'm a learner. And I'm reiterating the learnings I've had so far. But it's quite fascinating to talk about Western Ghats because
that's where you bought the land with your peers.
And that's where I grew up. That's where a lot of it's very closely associated with India. It covers 4 states. And it has a weather ecosystem which is both dry, monsoonish, wet all the time. And India is a large country, as you already know. Coast to coast, from north to south, is quite big. And most part of it is covered by Western Ghats on one side of the coast.
And the West Coast, is that correct? Yeah,
that's the West Coast. Yeah. And the beauty of Western Ghats is told depending on which state of India you are in. But what people don't realize is one long mountain with certain gaps in certain places.
Oh, wow. It's one gigantic mountain range.
Yeah, it's just one long mountain range. It is studied to be older than Himalayas. Because of this Gondwana theory of Africa and the
Central Asia being the
countries
connected.
Correct. And then it sort of split out billions of years ago. And interestingly, a lot of research has been identified on this Gondwana through obviously the tectonic plates and all of it, but also a lot of the um, uh, flora species being only in certain parts of Africa and also in India.
Ah,
And then sort
hence
of
it creates that
perceived that
connection.
hence the crates are connected. Could be, I read a brilliant book which talks about interesting theories like this. Obviously, it had happened so many years
We wouldn't
ago
know.
that we wouldn't know. So we just understanding, observing and understanding as we go, right? But
I'm
yeah,
liking that,
that,
understanding and evolving and interpreting. I like it.
yeah. So I never knew the importance of it. And I'm obviously building a narrative of Western Ghats. It's not like we Indians wake up in the morning and say, beautiful Western Ghats, and here are significance of it. We want to plug it in. It doesn't happen. And we all experience Western Ghats in many different ways. People just drive through it. People love driving.
But it's just
People,
so vast. You wouldn't really know that you're going into the Western Ghats.
yeah, and it's also quite different because some of the statistics are mind blowing. It is only 2% of India's land mass, but yet contains 45% of India's biodiversity.
Wow, that's a big
And
statistic.
yeah, it's one of the 8 currently. So there are about 22 hotspots, but one of the 8 biodiversity hotspots in the world. And there's a definition for it. It's the natureconservation.com organization which gives this title for hotspots. And these are areas of land which has diversity of at least 1,500 plant species and also depleting about 30% depletion has happened or endangered happened. And by Western Ghats, then there's the Himalayan range, then there's the Indo-Burma range, and then there is Sundarbans. These are 4 hotspots identified within the India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka ecosystem.
Are they
And
UNESCO heritage?
it is a
the
UNESCO heritage, yeah.
Yep.
And it's got climatic conditions which are so different that you wouldn't call it one forest. There are many forests, there are many ranges, there are dry. So the biodiversity on the dry side is quite different than the tiger reserves, than the things on top, up on the mountain ranges and all of that. There's a lot of endemicity here, which means that you don't find the species of flora, fauna, and fungi anywhere else in the world than in Western Ghats. And I think close to about 65% of some of those species are very endemic and endangered. So when I was trying to find a boat to land on to be able to build my dream, I really got attracted to it because, I have this thing in front of me. I grew up around one part of Western Ghats called Ooty, which is down south. It's one of the last few ranges and the highest peaks of it. I have seen Western Ghats. We sort of read about it, or you sort of put it in your brain and spit it out on paper in school. Western Ghats is on the west coast. That's it. You don't read more of it.
Draw a picture on it.
Draw a picture on it, identify it in the India map, and that's it. So in a way, when my wife and I were thinking about what we want to do to start to build our future, we said, there are people who are doing this and we want to be part of this. Why not? This is closest to us and this is around us. Do we want to save Himalayas? Absolutely, I think. But I also think that there are enough people doing it there that we want to do something which is what we call our world, right? This is our world. We want to revolve around it. So yeah, that's why we've sort of thought about conserving Western Ghats within Mycelium, which is now I found this newfound love for Western Ghats now.
Amazing. And you mentioned it's very much a long-term journey. Now, inevitably, you and I, we can't live forever.
Yeah.
In 50 years' time, Vinod.
Yeah.
What would mycelium ecology look like?
Wow. I think it's an interesting question.
You're on this
I've,
journey, right? But I'm very curious to see what.
yeah, yeah.
I don't think
What
there
is,
is an end goal. So I'm just going to
mhm,
say, because there's no end goal in nature,
mhm,
50 years time,
mhm,
what's going to put a
mhm,
smile on your face when you see, when someone says mycelium ecology,
mhm,
what's going to put a smile on your face?
mhm. Let me answer this in a little different way.
Sure.
I'll tell you why I want to say this. Because uh, one of the reasons why we're building mycelium is not for today's world, but for the world tomorrow. So, in a way, um, we're building for something which will fruitfully result in better outcomes 50 years from now.
Mm.
It will not yield today because we're going against the perception of wanting something today, which is what has led to cutting down trees because you want a land for you to build it,
Instant
which is what is
gratification.
instant gratification. Lovely way of putting it. Not that I love delayed gratification. I love instant
We want it now, now,
gratification.
now, 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 right?
We want it now, now, now. That all of our investments have also become it's cut short. A good example would be I could buy a nice, I'll take, given that we're talking about land, and I could buy a nice piece of land or a prime property for my kids. I would have worked really hard. I would have built a house, or I would have bought a nice condo. I would have bought a big farm, whatever. But the resulting factor is, and we've seen this history repeating itself. When we buy mycelium, when we look for depleted land we want to buy, these are not depleted lands because human intervention has happened. These are depleted lands because we do not understand it the right way, and we've not done anything. Many years ago, ancestors have bought pieces of land, assuming that their kids would continue in the agriculture business. And the kids don't, because kids' perception is very different. Their minimalistic life is very different. So it's a real problem in India and tier 2 and tier 3 places as you go. A lot of the poor farmers are poor because their generation do not want to lead this life. They want to be able to go on to, obviously they want to be able to earn better, which then becomes undervalued land. So in a way, the future building for 50 years from now is quite challenging, because we are not, I'm not going to be able to be in a commanding authority to drive the vision of mycelium in 50 years. Um, it probably will be my kids or maybe their kids, as you think about it. So it'll be unwise for me to say that this is what will put on smile on my face, because this is my vision 50 years from now rather than their vision at that particular time. So
Interesting.
what will make me happy is building a platform for this openness to always be there, and not close it. What I mean by that is, obviously I'm not expecting, just because I get into, I'm not going to force one of my kids to be able to build this love nature. If they want to be a computer programmer, let them be. If they want to completely hate nature, let them be. And I don't think we have the right to say. But if we could inspire more people in this 50-year journey, if we could have more younger generation to not do what we've done by this, but be able to coexist, be able to find this balance, I think I would have fulfilled this journey at Mycelium. So yeah, I think our goal is to build that openness to, in a way, we'll fail, we'll succeed, it doesn't matter, but at least we are tempted to think about this and maybe inspire a couple of people to do it. And I think that in itself is good enough, because I think that's what is needed today. Inspiration for the future generation to build, not to dictate what they need to be building, but just give them
Just to
inspiration
inspire.
platform, just to inspire and keep that openness and keep it coming.
Fantastic, Vinod. So, we've talked 50 years from now, right? And I'm conscious of your time.
Yeah.
Let's talk a hypothetical here, right? Say, for example, time travel existed, but it's only an observer mode. Now, what that means is that you can't do anything whilst you go back in time.
Got it.
Now, considering you grew up nature, you're very much getting back into it. You showed me these lovely photos of Western Ghats. If time travel existed for you, Vinod, where would you go and why? Given your passion for nature.
Yeah. I'll start with a cheesier note. I'll probably try and travel with you when you hit your 100 million subscriber on the Median podcast and maybe celebrate it. It's a moment for celebration. Just starting off with a little bit of pun intended there, but
I like it.
Yeah.
This is recorded, by the way, so it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen. It's a very thought-provoking question, and obviously, I've had many things in the past, right? And I've been inspired by Doc himself in Back to the Future, and sort of see where it goes. But I not to sound too preachy, but I think some of these questions. I struggled to answer them during pandemic because I think it was a great reality check for our generation to stop thinking about all this nonsense and sort of move forward. Not the time travel nonsense, but sort of worried too much about the past and the future because there's nothing in our control. But if I were to go into observe stuff like this, right, I probably would love to, I'd probably would want to be when Gondwana split and Western Ghats came
There
out.
you
I'd
go.
probably
Wow.
be observing it to see if it really meant that. I have always been fascinated by our evolution. So probably, given that we are observing it, I'll probably see which one of the first things got out of water into land. What did that look like? Just
Fantastic
being curious
answer.
about it. Yeah, some of those. If I'm thinking wild, these are something I'll think about, because I think these are always been in my mind visually represented when I read a book on history of the world and all of that. But given my newfound interest, maybe I look at it, go back and observe what it is and learn it firsthand.
Yeah, my one was the pyramids. I'm just fascinated
go.
to see who built them.
Yeah.
And so the reason why I have these sort of questions in the end is just we just got to have a laugh. It's a conversation. It's a bit of a joke. And I just want to say thank you, Vinod, for sharing with me the inner thoughts going in your head. And you're right. Sometimes there's something going in your mind, but it's difficult to somehow then translate that into simple words. One of the biggest lessons for me is that we all are very different. There's no right or wrong. It's very much each to their own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very well put. Yeah.
Yeah. So Vinod, thank you very much for your time. So just a reminder, 3 words that define what simple means to you. And I'm coming to see you in Bangalore, right?
There you go. Yeah, you please do come. I'd love to host you here. You'll probably learn a thing or two. But no, thank you very much for presenting my story And it is interesting because this exercise also helps me, I think, understand, because articulating somebody's story
It
is
can be
quite an
hard.
experience.
It
It can
is.
be hard. It's quite an experience. And I have had the pleasure of preparing for this podcast. And I think you do a great job of keeping this really to just me and keeping it fluidic. So I loved it. I wish you all the best. I wish that this continues to grow. And someday, hopefully, I'm able to do the honors of hosting you in Bangalore. And we can talk, maybe record a podcast from one of the nature conservation site we're building.
Hey. I think one of my, wouldn't say it's a dream, but a milestone, as you put it, is that when I do hit a certain number,
Yeah.
it's symbolic. Let's
Yeah.
be honest.
Yes, it
I probably
is.
will convert a room in my house, which is like a full-on podcast studio, and I'll get people to come over here instead.
Absolutely. That's great. Awesome. I'd love to be there. But Jeff, thank you for
Fantastic.
it.
My pleasure, Vinod.